Emina's hands trembled against the office window glass on the top floor of the Al-Raji Tower, while Khalid al-Mansouri's eyes pierced her back like silent blades. The desert wind blew strong against the armored glass, but nothing compared to the storm that had just erupted within those four walls of marble and steel. He had just made a proposal that challenged everything she believed about herself, about dignity, about the value of a woman. 1 year, he repeated, his grave voice echoing in the tense silence. Perhaps less. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating, from 1 to 10, and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. Amina Qasim had worked 4 years as executive assistant to the most powerful man in the kingdom. 4 years organizing his life with the precision of a Swiss watch, anticipating every need, protecting every secret. Khalid al-Mansouri was the kind of man who moved mountains with a phone call, who built entire cities with a signature. At 42 years old, he commanded an empire that stretched from Riyadh to London, from oil to technology, from tradition to innovation. But that Thursday afternoon, as the sun began to lean over the skyscrapers of the Saudi capital, he was not the invincible magnate. He was just a man sitting behind a mahogany desk, holding a medical envelope with hands she had never seen tremble before. Pancreatic cancer, he had said with the same coldness with which he discussed business mergers. Advanced stage. The doctors were direct. Amina had felt the ground move beneath her feet, not out of professional compassion, but out of something deeper that she refused to name. Khalid was demanding, sometimes harsh, but fair. He respected her intelligence, valued her efficiency, trusted her judgment. In 4 years, he had become more than a boss. He was the stability she had never known. The will requires a legitimate heir, he continued, his dark eyes fixed on hers. Without children, everything goes to my cousin Faisal. He will destroy in 2 years what took me 20 to build. Amina knew Faisal al-Mansouri. She had organized enough meetings to know that he saw companies as personal ATMs and employees as disposable pieces. The idea of seeing him in charge made her stomach churn. "I need someone I trust," Khalid said, standing up and walking to the window where she stood. "Someone who understands what's at stake. Someone who accepts to be treated like a broodmare," she cut in, finally turning to face him. His face contorted as if he had been slapped. "That's not how I see you." "So how do you see me?" Amina crossed her arms, indignation rising like a tide. 4 years working by your side, and now I discover that my greatest value is my uterus. Khalid ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration she recognized from moments of extreme pressure. "You're simplifying." "I'm being realistic." She took a few steps back, creating distance. "Contract marriage, a child, payment. Is that it?" "Freedom," he said. "Complete financial freedom. You will never have to worry about money again, neither you nor your family." The mention of family was like a direct thrust. Amina thought of her mother, Soraya, wasting away in a hospital bed in Jeddah, fighting diabetes without access to the best treatments. She thought of the medical bills piling up like sand dunes, of the rented apartment she could barely maintain, of the dreams of studying architecture she had abandoned to support the household after her father died. "You investigated my life," she said, not as a question, but as a bitter realization. "I needed to be sure you would understand the offer," he replied bluntly. "The offer?" Amina laughed without humor. "As if I were a property for sale." Khalid approached, but stopped at a respectful distance. "You are the most upright person I know. You are intelligent, strong, loyal. If I am going to entrust the future of my company to someone, if I am going to entrust my child to someone, that person is you. Your child, she repeated. Not our child, yours. Legally, yes, but the child would be cared for and loved. You would have all the rights of a mother, all the guarantees, except the right to choose the father. The silence that followed was dense, like the air before a sandstorm. Khalid went back behind the desk, as if the mahogany furniture could protect him from the vulnerability that had settled between them. "I cannot force you to anything," he finally said. "I only ask that you consider it. Think of your mother. Think of what you could do with the freedom I am offering." Amina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the responsibilities she had carried for years press on her shoulders like stones. When she opened them, she met Khalid's gaze and saw something she had never noticed before. Fear. Not of the business he might lose, but of the emptiness he would leave behind. "I need time," she said. "Time is exactly what I don't have." "Then there's no deal." Amina picked up her purse and walked towards the door. 3 days, he said to her back. "I'll give you 3 days to decide." She stopped, with her hand on the golden doorknob, without turning around. "And if I refuse, then I will respect your decision, and I will look for another alternative." "What alternative?" Khalid took a while to answer. "I don't know. Maybe there isn't one." Amina left the office without looking back, but carrying in her ears the sound of the heavy breathing of a man accustomed to controlling everything except his own destiny. In the mirrored elevator, she saw the reflection of a 28-year-old woman who had just received the most shocking and tempting proposal of her life. As the elevator descended, through the 40 floors of the tower, she wondered if she was descending towards freedom or sinking into a moral abyss from which she would never be able to escape. Chapter 2. Amina's apartment in Al-Malaz was too modest for someone who managed billions every day, but it was her refuge. That night, as she prepared mint tea sitting on the Persian rug she had inherited from her grandmother, the phone rang. It was the Jeddah hospital. "Miss Qasim, your mother had a crisis," said the nurse's tired voice. "We need to adjust the medication, but the health plan doesn't cover the new treatment. It's 15,000 rials. Amina closed her eyes, calculating mentally. Her salary, however generous by local standards, could no longer bear this expense. She had already sold her mother's jewelry. She had already cancelled her own health plan. "Can it wait until Monday?" she asked, knowing that each day of delay could cost more than money. "We'll try to stabilize her until then," the nurse replied, but the tone made it clear that miracles had an expiration date. After hanging up, Amina went to the small office she had set up in a corner of the living room. In the drawer she kept all the family documents, certificates, diplomas, her father's simple will. And there, among papers yellowed by time, was her birth certificate with the full name she rarely used. Amina Soraya Qasim, daughter of Omar Qasim, an Arabic literature professor who died of a heart attack at 50, leaving 2 women without financial protection. Daughter of Soraya Khalil, who had been Jeddah's most talented seamstress before illness stole the steadiness of her hands. Granddaughter of Mariam, who embroidered wedding veils for the most traditional families in the region and who always said, "A strong woman doesn't need a man to survive, but needs wisdom to recognize when to accept help." Would accepting Khalid's proposal be wisdom or desperation? The next morning, Amina arrived early at the office, as she always did. Khalid had not yet arrived. He usually spent Friday mornings at the equestrian club on the outskirts of Riyadh. It was his only moment of peace in a hectic week. She took advantage of the quiet to review the week's contracts, but her mind kept wandering. She knew Khalid al-Mansouri better than anyone, including his own family. She knew he drank Turkish coffee without sugar, that he received calls from his sister Layla every Sunday at 8 in the morning, that he kept a photo of his deceased mother in the locked drawer of his desk. She also knew that he had refused 3 arranged marriages by his family, that he had never brought a woman to the office in 4 years, that he worked 16 hours a day to avoid facing the emptiness of the mansion in Al-Uruba, where he lived alone. When he arrived around 10, his face showed the marks of a sleepless night. He greeted her with a discreet nod and locked himself in the office. At 11:30, the internal phone rang. "Can you come here, please?" Amina found him standing by the window, watching the intense movement of King Fahd Avenue 40 floors below. He didn't turn when she entered. "My mother died when I was 17, he suddenly said. "Cancer, too. My father remarried 6 months later to a woman 20 years younger. She had 3 children with him. When he died, I discovered he had left 40% of the company to her and her children." Amina remained silent, intuiting that he needed to speak. "I spent 15 years buying back the shares that were rightfully mine," Khalid continued. "I learned that blood family doesn't always mean loyalty, and that sometimes the most trustworthy person is the one we choose to be by our side." He finally turned, and Amina saw something different in his eyes. Not the hardness of the magnate accustomed to winning, but the vulnerability of a man who had learned not to trust almost anyone. "I'm not asking you to marry me for who I am," he said. "I'm asking because I know who you are." "And who am I?" Amina asked, genuinely curious about how he saw her. "Someone who works late to review contracts 3 times, ensuring no employee is harmed. Someone who negotiates with suppliers so that family businesses are not crushed by large groups. Someone who remembers the birthdays of all executives' children and sends cards signed by me." Amina blinked, surprised. She hadn't known he had noticed these details. "Someone," Khalid continued, "who sent flowers to the hospital when the driver Hassan's daughter was born. Someone who translated legal documents into Arabic when the Syrian accountant had immigration problems. Someone who—" "Stop," she said, feeling her cheeks burn. "Do you have people watching the employees?" "I have eyes," he replied simply, "and I've learned to value those who show character when no one is watching." The silence that followed was different from the previous afternoon. Less tense, more intimate. Amina realized that somehow Khalid had paid attention to her in ways she had never imagined. "If I accepted," she said slowly, testing the words, "what exactly would the terms be?" Khalid walked to the desk and opened a folder she hadn't seen before. Immediate civil marriage, with a prenuptial agreement protecting both. Shared residence until the child's birth. Full medical support for your mother starting today. An untouched educational fund of 2 million reals for the child. He paused, as if measuring the impact of each word. After the birth, an amicable divorce if you wish. Shared custody, and an amount that will ensure you never have to worry about money again. 15 million rials, plus a lifelong monthly income. Amina felt the air escape her lungs. It was more money than she could earn in 10 lifetimes of work. "And what do you gain besides the air?" she asked. "Peace," he replied without hesitation. "The certainty that my legacy will be in competent hands, and that my company will continue to care for the thousands of families who depend on it." "What if the child is a girl?" "She will be an heir, nonetheless. I am not my father." Amina looked at his hands, strong and well-kept, but marked by small scars, traces of the time he worked in the oil fields before inheriting the empire. They were hands that built, that fought, that never bowed to adversity. "I need guarantees," she finally said. "Which ones?" "That my mother's treatment will begin today. That I will have access to independent lawyers to review any document, that I can withdraw from the agreement if my dignity is violated in any way." "I accept," he said immediately. "And one last condition." Khalid raised his eyebrows, waiting. "If we do this, it will be done with respect. I am not a commercial transaction. I am a woman making the most difficult decision of her life." For the first time since she had known him, Khalid al-Mansouri smiled. Not the calculated smile of business meetings, but something genuine and almost relieved. "Then we have a deal?" Amina took a deep breath, thinking of her mother, of the future opening before her, of the child she might hold in her arms in a few months. She also thought of the man before her, not the billionaire, but the orphan who had learned not to trust anyone and was willing to trust her with the most precious thing he possessed. "We have a deal," she said. Chapter 3. The wedding took place on a rainy Tuesday in a discreet civil ceremony at the Al-Malaz registry office. Only 2 witnesses were present: Khalid's lawyer, a serious man named Ibrahim al-Otaibi, and Zahra al-Khatib, Amina's best friend since university. Zahra held Amina's hand tightly throughout the ceremony, trying to convey support through touch. She was the only person who knew the whole truth about the agreement and had spent an entire hour trying to dissuade her friend the night before. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered as the registry official read the vows in Arabic. Amina looked at Khalid, who stood beside her in a dark grey suit, his hands firm as he held the documents. He had kept all his promises of the last 3 days. Her mother was already admitted to the best private hospital in Jeddah. The independent lawyers had approved every clause of the contract, and he had treated the entire process with a respectful formality that, paradoxically, made her more nervous than if he had been arrogant. "Yes," she whispered back to Zahra, "I'm sure." But when it came time to say, "I do," her voice came out weaker than she intended. Khalid looked directly into her eyes for the first time that day, and something in his expression, perhaps gratitude, perhaps relief, made her heart race, in a way she didn't expect. After the ceremony, they headed to Khalid's mansion in Al-Uruba, where she would now live. During the ride in the silent Mercedes, Amina watched the city through the window, trying to process the fact that she was officially married to the man beside her. The mansion was exactly as she had imagined, imposing, modern, and almost intimidatingly perfect. Impeccable gardens surrounded the glass and marble structure, with fountains creating a soft sound of running water. Inside, the design was minimalist but luxurious, with contemporary artworks on the walls and furniture that seemed to have come straight from a decor magazine. "Your rooms are in the East Wing," Khalid said, leading her down a wide corridor. "You'll have complete privacy. Ahmad, the butler, can help you with anything you need." He stopped before a suite that was larger than her entire previous apartment. The decor was elegant but neutral, like a 5-star hotel room. There was even a small adjacent office, complete with a computer and printer. "If you want to change anything, feel free," he said, setting her suitcases on the floor. "This is your home now." "Thank you," Amina said, not quite knowing what else to say. Khalid hesitated for a moment at the door, as if he were going to say something more, but only nodded. "Dinner will be served at 8, if you wish to join me. Otherwise, Ahmad can bring something to your room." When he left, Amina sat on the edge of the king-size bed and finally allowed the reality of what she had done to fully hit her. She was married, living with a man she barely knew outside of work, committed to having a child with him. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her mother, calling from the hospital. "Habibti, how's the new job?" Soraya asked, in a voice more animated than Amina had heard in months. She had told her mother that she was taking on a new position at the company, which required a change of residence. The truth about the marriage would wait until later, when she knew how to explain it without Soraya dying of worry. "Everything's fine, Mama. How do you feel? Better. The doctors here are very attentive. They said the new treatment I started today can make a big difference. Soraya's voice was filled with hope. I don't know how you managed to pay for this hospital, my daughter, but I'm grateful to Allah and to you. Amina closed her eyes, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. Just focus on getting better, Mama. After hanging up, she decided to explore the house. The mansion had 3 floors, each more impressive than the last. There was a library with thousands of books in Arabic, English and French, a private cinema room, a fully equipped gym, and even a heated indoor pool. At the end of her self-guided tour, she found herself in the kitchen, where she found Ahmad, a middle-aged Filipino man, preparing dinner. "Madam Al-Mansouri," he said with a warm smile, "can I prepare something special for you tonight?" The surname sounded strange to her ears. Madam Al-Mansouri. She really was married. "No, thank you, Ahmad. What does Mr. Khalid usually have for dinner?" "He's not very demanding," Ahmad replied. "He usually works late and eats anything. But today he asked me to prepare mansaf. He said it's your favorite dish." Amina was surprised. Mansaf really was her favorite dish, but she had never mentioned it at work. How did he know? At exactly 8 o'clock, she went down for dinner. Khalid was already in the dining room, but had changed from his suit into casual clothes, a white shirt and dark pants that made him look younger and less intimidating. "How are the rooms?" he asked when she sat down. "Very beautiful. Thank you." Ahmad served the mansaf on fine porcelain plates, and Amina had to admit it was delicious. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Khalid spoke again. "I know this is strange," he said, "for both of us, but I want you to feel comfortable here." "You knew mansaf is my favorite dish," she said, more as an observation than a question. Khalid seemed slightly embarrassed. "You mentioned it once, 2 years ago, when you were organizing a dinner for Jordanian clients. You said your grandmother made the best mansaf in Jeddah." Amina stared at him, impressed that he had remembered such a casual comment. "You have an incredible memory. Only for important things." The way he said it, simple, direct, but loaded with meaning, made Amina realize that perhaps she was more important to Khalid than she had imagined. Not as a woman, necessarily, but as a person, as someone whose details were worth memorizing. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you never marry? I mean, before this?" Khalid put down his fork, thoughtful. "My family tried to arrange marriages a few times. Women from good families, well-educated, suitable." He paused. "But I always knew they were interested in what I could offer, not in who I was. And I couldn't imagine sharing my life with someone who saw me only as a provider. And now? Now I know exactly why you are here. It's honest, preferable to hypocrisy." Amina felt a tightness in her chest. It was a cruel way to view their marriage, but she couldn't deny there was truth in it. "And you?" he asked. "Was there never anyone special?" Amina hesitated. She had had a few relationships, but nothing serious. She had always put her career and family first. "There were a few boyfriends in university. Nothing that lasted." She took a sip of water. "It's hard to build a relationship when you're always putting other people first." "Perhaps that's why we work well as a team," Khalid said. "Both of us know how to put responsibilities above personal desires." They finished dinner in a more comfortable silence. When Ahmad began to clear the plates, Khalid stood up. "I'm going to work for a few hours in the office," he said. "Feel free to use any area of the house. The library has some books in Portuguese, if you're interested." "You have books in Portuguese?" "Machado de Assis, Clarice Lispector, some others. I know you studied comparative literature in university." Again, that demonstration that he had paid attention to details she thought had gone unnoticed. It was disconcerting and somehow touching. That night, Amina stayed up, late in the library, leafing through a copy of A Hora da Estrella. The irony was not lost on her. There she was, a young woman of humble origin, now living in a mansion, married to one of the richest men in the country. But, unlike Maccabea, she had made a conscious choice. She had negotiated her destiny. The question was whether she had made the right choice. Chapter 4. 3 weeks after the wedding, Amina began to notice the small rituals that governed Khalid al-Mansouri's life outside the corporate spotlight. He woke up every morning at 5:30 to pray Fajr, then ran for 40 minutes on the treadmill in the gym. He always drank Turkish coffee from the same white cup, read 3 different newspapers while eating 2 slices of Arabic bread with labneh, and was in the office by 7:15. But there were other things she only discovered living with him, like how he stood on the library balcony every Friday night, watching the sunset over Riyadh with an almost melancholic expression. How he talked to himself in English when he was focused, murmuring words she couldn't fully understand. How he always left a light on in the hallway, even when he was sleeping. A childish vulnerability that contrasted with his public persona. In the 4th week, the first moment of real closeness between them happened. Amina was in the kitchen one Saturday morning, trying to make coffee the way her father used to, strong, with a hint of cardamom. She had woken up earlier than usual and gone downstairs to try to create some domestic normalcy amidst that surreal situation. "Smells good," Khalid's voice said behind her. She turned, surprised. He was in a bathrobe, his hair slightly disheveled, without the armor of immaculate suits. For the first time, he seemed ordinary, approachable. "I didn't know you were awake," she said, trying not to notice how the bathrobe highlighted the width of his shoulders. "The smell woke me up. It's been a long time since I smelled that aroma at home." He approached, inhaling. "Cardamom. My father used to say that coffee without cardamom was like conversation without a soul." Khalid smiled. Not the professional smile, but something genuine. "My mother used to say the same thing." They stood in silence for a moment, united by that shared memory of families that no longer existed. Amina served 2 cups and they sat on the kitchen counter side by side. "Can I confess something?" Khalid said after the first sip. "Of course." "I was afraid you would regret it. In the first few days you seemed so distant." Amina looked at him sideways. "I was adapting. It's a lot of change at once." "And now?" "Now?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now I feel less like an intruder." "You were never an intruder. This is your home." The way he said your home, not our home, but your home, touched something. Deep in Amina, it was an offer of belonging without conditions, something she didn't expect. "Khalid," she said impulsively, "have you ever regretted it? Our agreement?" He took a while to answer, twirling the cup in his hands. "No," he finally said. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish, asking you to sacrifice your freedom for my peace of mind." "It wasn't a sacrifice," Amina said. "It was a choice." "What's the difference?" "Sacrifice is when someone takes something from you. Choice is when you decide to trade one thing for another." She looked at him. "I chose to trade uncertainty for security. I chose to save my mother. I chose to give a child the chance to grow up with stability." "And what did you lose?" Amina thought for a moment. The illusion that romantic love was more important than compatibility and respect. Khalid stared at her with an intensity that made her blush. "You don't believe in romantic love?" "I do," she said slowly, "but I learned that it doesn't pay medical bills or build solid futures. Very pragmatic, very realistic." They finished their coffee in silence, but it was a different silence from the first few days. Comfortable, companionable. When Khalid got up to get ready for work, he stopped beside her. "Thank you for the coffee," he said, "and for the honesty." That afternoon, Amina received a call that changed the tone of everything. It was Dr. Majed Farouk, Khalid's doctor. "Madam Al-Mansouri, your husband missed his appointment today. It's the second time this month. I need to explain the seriousness of the situation." Amina felt her heart race. "He didn't tell me anything about a medical appointment. The treatment we started can significantly slow the progression of the disease, but only if he is strict with the protocol. Chemotherapy sessions are not optional." When Khalid came home that night, Amina was waiting for him in the library. "Dr. Farouk called," she said without preamble. His face immediately closed. "He shouldn't have bothered you." "Bothered?" Amina stood up, indignant. "You're missing chemotherapy sessions. They're just temporary postponements. I have important meetings, more important than your life, more important than a few more weeks of useless suffering." Amina stared at him, shocked. "You've given up, completely given up." Khalid poured himself whiskey from the liquor cabinet, his hands trembling slightly. "I haven't given up. I'm realistic. Realistic would be fighting for every day you could have with your child." "My child," he turned to her, his eyes shining dangerously. "Our child, Amina. If you decide to continue with all of this after I die." The word "die" hung in the air between them like a blade. It was the first time he had verbalized his own death so directly, and the impact was devastating. "You can't give up," she said, her voice softer now. "Not when there's hope." "What hope?" "A few more months of nausea, weakness, of watching my body waste away while my company needs strong leadership." Amina approached him, placing her hand over his. "The hope of meeting your child, of seeing him take his first steps, of teaching him how to be an upright man." Khalid looked at her hand over his, small but firm. "What if I can't be the father he deserves? What if the disease turns me into someone he will only remember as a suffering ghost?" "Then you fight to be remembered as the man who never gave up, even when everything seemed impossible." That night, for the first time since their marriage, they had dinner together, in total silence. But it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of the first few days. It was the silence of two people processing a painful truth. They were beginning to care about each other in ways the contract didn't foresee. 2 days later, Khalid attended his chemotherapy session. Amina insisted on accompanying him. During the 3 hours he was connected to the medications, she remained by his side, working on her laptop, occasionally offering water or adjusting his pillow. They didn't talk much, but her presence there said everything that needed to be said. When they left the hospital, Khalid was visibly disheartened by the effects of the treatment. "You didn't have to come," he said in the car. "I know," Amina replied, "but I wanted to come." "Why?" She took a while to answer, looking out the window at the lights of Riyadh turning on as night fell. "Because no one should face this alone," she finally said, "and because I care about you." Khalid looked at her for a long moment, something changing in his expression. "I care about you too," he said, and both knew that something fundamental had changed between them at that moment. Chapter 5. 2 months after the wedding, Amina discovered she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning, when the morning sickness she had been feeling for a week finally made sense. The test bought at the 24-hour pharmacy showed 2 clear lines, and she sat on the bathroom floor for 10 minutes, looking at that small piece of plastic that confirmed everything had irrevocably changed. Khalid was in the office when she called him. "Can I talk to you when you get home?" she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Did something happen? You sound different." It's all good. I just need to talk to you in person. That night, she waited for him in the library, the pregnancy test tucked into her dress pocket. When he arrived, his face showed the fatigue marks from the treatments he had religiously resumed in recent weeks. "How was the session today?" she asked. "Better. Dr. Farouk said the markers are stabilizing." He sat next to her on the sofa. "What did you want to tell me?" Amina took the test from her pocket and handed it to him without saying a word. Khalid looked at the object for a long moment, as if he couldn't process what he was seeing. When he finally understood, his face went through a series of emotions: shock, relief, joy, fear. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Absolutely." He stood up and walked to the window, his hands running through his hair in a gesture she had learned to recognize as a sign that he was trying to process important information. "How do you feel?" he asked, still with his back to her. "Morning sickness. Tired. But happy," she said, surprised to realize it was true. "And you? How do you feel?" Khalid turned, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Terrified," he said, "and happier than I thought possible." That night, they talked late into the night about the future, about names, about how they wanted to raise the child. It was the first time they had talked about the baby not as a contractual clause, but as their child, their real child. The following weeks brought a new intimacy between them. Khalid became extremely protective, insisting that she reduce her workload, hiring a nutritionist to monitor her diet, transforming one of the rooms into a nursery that looked more like a miniature palace. But it was during a difficult night, when Amina had terrifying cramps in her 3rd month, that something fundamental broke between them. Khalid took her to the hospital at 2 in the morning, driving like a man possessed through the empty streets of Riyadh. At the hospital, while the doctors ran tests to ensure the baby was fine, he held her hand with a strength that bordered on desperation. "If anything happens," he began. "Nothing will happen," Amina said, but her own voice trembled. "If it happens, I want you to know that us, it's no longer just a contract. For me." Amina looked at him, seeing the raw vulnerability in his eyes. "Not for me either." When the doctors confirmed that both she and the baby were fine, that it had just been a normal pregnancy scare, they returned home in silence. But when they arrived, instead of going to their separate rooms as usual, they stayed in the living room, sitting on the sofa, close but not touching. "Khalid," Amina said slowly, "what is happening to us?" "I don't know," he replied. "I only know that the idea of losing you or the baby terrified me more than any medical diagnosis." "And that scares you?" "It terrifies me because it wasn't in the plans. It wasn't supposed to be real." Amina turned to face him completely. "But it is real. It is." They looked at each other for a long moment, and then, almost without realizing it, they were kissing. It was a desperate kiss, laden with months of tension, of forced proximity that had turned into genuine desire, of fear of losing something they didn't even know they were building. When they separated, both were breathing heavily. "Amina," Khalid began. "No," she said. "Don't say anything now. Don't spoil this by trying to rationalize." That night, for the first time, they slept in the same room, not out of obligation or planning, but because neither of them wanted to be apart. Khalid held Amina as she slept, a protective hand over her belly where their child was growing. The next morning, however, reality came knocking in the form of Faisal al-Mansouri, Khalid's cousin. Faisal arrived unannounced, as he always did, using his minority stake in the companies as an excuse to interfere in any important decision. He was a 40-year-old man, slender and always impeccably dressed, with calculating eyes that evaluated everything in terms of monetary value. "Khalid, Habibi," he said, embracing his cousin with false affection. "I've heard interesting rumors about your sudden marriage." Amina was having breakfast when Faisal arrived and immediately felt the change in atmosphere. Khalid stiffened, returning to the defensive posture she knew from the most tense meetings. "Faisal, what a pleasure to see you," Khalid said with a coldness that fooled no one. "And this must be the new Madame al-Mansouri," Faisal said, looking at Amina with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a fascinating coincidence, isn't it? The heir marries his assistant right after receiving a terminal diagnosis. Watch your words, Faisal," Khalid warned, his voice dangerously low. "Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm sure it's true love," Faisal said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "It's just interesting how some people get lucky, isn't it, dear?" Amina felt the blood rush to her face, but before she could respond, Khalid stepped between them. "Enough," he said. "You have 2 minutes to explain what you came here for before I have security escort you out." "I came to congratulate the future father," Faisal said with a poisonous smile. "Yes, I heard about the pregnancy. News travels fast in our family. How convenient, isn't it? Just in time to secure the inheritance." It was then that Amina realized Faisal wasn't just there by chance. He was building a narrative, planting seeds of doubt that could grow and destroy everything she and Khalid had begun to build. And for the first time since she had accepted the marriage proposal, she felt real fear. Not of the financial future, not of the child, but of losing something that had become infinitely more valuable than any contract. The man she had learned to love against all odds. Chapter 6. Faisal's campaign against Amina began subtly in the weeks following his visit. First, there were seemingly innocent comments to members of the al-Mansouri family about the convenience of the marriage timing. Then, whispers in Riyadh's business circles about the assistant who had snared the sick boss. Khalid tried to shield Amina from these rumors, but she felt the weight of the stares when she accompanied him to obligatory social gatherings. The wives of other businessmen greeted her with cold smiles, and she knew exactly what they thought. Fortune hunter who had taken advantage of a sick man's vulnerability. What bothered her most was not the judgment itself, but the fact that there was a seed of truth in it. She really had married for money. The fact that she had fallen in love with her husband later did not erase the transactional nature of the beginning of their relationship. One afternoon, while organizing documents in the Home Office, Amina found Khalid on the phone with Dr. Farouk. The door was ajar, and she couldn't help but overhear. "Yes, doctor, I understand the results are encouraging," Khalid was saying, "but I want you to keep this between us for now, because I need to be absolutely sure before I change any important decisions." Amina felt her heart race. What important decisions? Why was Khalid hiding good medical news? That night, during dinner, she tried to approach the subject indirectly. "How was the appointment today?" "Normal," he replied, without raising his eyes from his plate. "The doctors want to maintain the current protocol." It was a lie, and both knew it. For the first time since they had kissed, Amina felt a distance opening between them. 3 days later, everything collapsed. Amina was in the kitchen preparing tea when she heard loud voices coming from Khalid's office. He was arguing with someone on the phone, but not in Arabic, in English, which meant it was a serious business matter. "I don't care what the recordings suggest, Omar. I trust my wife." "Recordings?" Amina felt her blood run cold. "Yes, I know she was present at the meeting with the Kuwaiti clients. No, that doesn't prove she was passing on information." The phone slammed down, and seconds later Khalid appeared in the kitchen, his face tense with anger. "What happened?" Amina asked. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said, but the way he avoided her gaze made her even more nervous. "Khalid, I heard you mentioning recordings. They were misunderstandings. Faisal is trying to cause trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Khalid sighed heavily, running his hands over his face. "He's spreading rumors that you married me to gain access to privileged company information, that you're passing data to competitors." Amina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "And you believe him?" "Of course not. Then why does it seem like you're doubting me?" Khalid looked into her eyes for the first time since he had arrived home. "Because he has recordings, Amina, of you talking on the phone about specific contracts. I was talking to the independent lawyers you yourself recommended to me to clarify some clauses of our prenuptial agreement. That's what I told him. But he has a conversation of yours with a woman named Zara where you discuss specific values of some company contracts." Amina remembered immediately. It was a conversation she had had with her best friend, trying to explain why she had married so suddenly. She had mentioned some numbers to justify the financial stability the marriage would bring, but it was information any executive assistant would have access to. "Zahra is my best friend," Amina explained. "I was trying to make her understand why I had made that decision. I wasn't passing on confidential information." "I know that," Khalid said, "but the recording, out of context, can seem incriminating." "Yes." They were silent for a moment. Amina could see the internal struggle on Khalid's face, between trusting the woman who had become his real wife and protecting the empire he had taken decades to build. "Do you trust me?" she asked directly. "I trust you," he replied without hesitation. "Really? Because when Faisal brought these accusations, I saw in your eyes that you considered, even for a second, the possibility that they were true." Khalid couldn't deny it, because she was right. "And I need someone who trusts me completely," Amina continued, "especially now that we're going to have a daughter. I can't raise a child in an environment where I'm constantly under suspicion." "What are you saying?" Khalid's hesitation lasted only 2 seconds, but it was long enough to break something inside Amina. She saw in his eyes the same expression he had when weighing business risks, calculating costs and benefits. "I need to protect the company," he finally said. "There are thousands of employees who depend—" "I understand," she interrupted, her voice strangely calm. "The company comes first, as always." "It's not like that." "No? Then tell me, Khalid, if you had to choose between me and the company, what would you choose?" He didn't answer, and the silence was answer enough. Amina went up to her room, locked the door, and for the first time in months, cried. Not out of anger, but out of disillusionment. She had made the fatal mistake of confusing a business agreement with a real marriage, desire with love, convenience with commitment. The next morning, Khalid knocked on her bedroom door. "Amina, can we talk?" "I'm late for my medical appointment," she replied, without opening the door. "I'll go with you." "You don't have to." "I want to go." "Khalid," she said through the door, "the company needs you. Go take care of it." It was a phrase laden with double meaning, and both knew it. At the medical appointment, Dr. Sarah Al-Zahra confirmed that the pregnancy was progressing. Perfectly. It was a girl, and she was healthy. Amina smiled at seeing the baby on the ultrasound, but inside she felt a growing emptiness. She was carrying the daughter of a man who, when forced to choose, would always choose his business over her. That afternoon, when she returned home, she found Khalid in the office on the phone with his lawyers. He was organizing a complete investigation into Faisal's accusations, determined to prove Amina's innocence. But the damage was already done. Trust, once scratched, is difficult to repair completely. And Amina began to wonder if it wouldn't be better for everyone, for her, for the child, for Khalid, if she simply fulfilled her part of the original contract and left their lives before things became even more complicated. After all, she had married to give her daughter security, not to live in constant suspicion and doubt. Perhaps it was time to remember why she had accepted the proposal in the first place and stop pretending that it could be something more than it really was, an agreement between two people who wanted different things from life. Chapter 7. The final confrontation happened on a Thursday afternoon, when Faisal arrived at the mansion with a folder of documents and a victorious smile that made Amina nauseous. She was 6 months pregnant, her belly already prominent, when she heard harsh voices coming from Khalid's office. "I can no longer ignore the evidence, cousin," Faisal was saying. "She manipulated you from the beginning." Amina slowly descended the stairs, each step echoing like a sentence. When she reached the half-open office door, she saw Khalid sitting behind the desk, pale and visibly weakened by the last chemotherapy cycle. Faisal was standing before him, spreading papers on the desk like cards in a macabre game. "Look here," Faisal was saying, pointing to photographs. "She meeting with representatives of Al Rashid Corporation 3 days before your wedding. Here, phone records showing frequent contact with competitors. And here," he paused dramatically, "the complete medical report she requested about your condition even before you made the proposal." Amina's heart stopped. She had indeed requested medical information, but through the company's legal channels. When Khalid had started missing important meetings, it was part of her responsibilities as an executive assistant to stay informed about any situation that could affect the company. "She knew exactly how sick you were," Faisal continued, "and calculated every move to position herself as the perfect solution to your despair." "That's not true," Khalid said, but his voice sounded tired without conviction. "No? Then why did she never mention that she had already rejected marriage proposals from other wealthy men? Why did she hide that she had studied business law in addition to literature? Why—" "Enough." Amina's voice cut through the air like a blade. She entered the office, her hands trembling but her posture erect. "I met with Al Rashid because they wanted to hire our consulting services," she said, looking directly at Khalid. "The phone records he's showing are of conversations about contracts you yourself asked me to negotiate. And yes, I requested medical information because it was my responsibility to know if my boss was fit to make important decisions." "And the other accusations?" Khalid asked. Amina took a deep breath. "I rejected marriage proposals because I didn't love those people. I studied law because I wanted to better understand the contracts I organized for you. And if that makes me a manipulator—" She paused. "Then maybe Faisal is right." The silence that followed was deafening. Faisal smiled like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Khalid looked at Amina with an indecipherable expression. "But there's one thing Faisal didn't tell you," Amina continued, taking an envelope from her pocket. "This morning I received this from Dr. Farouk's office." She placed the envelope on the table. "These are your true medical results from the last 3 months. Results you asked the doctor not to share with me." Khalid turned even paler. "Amina, your cancer is in remission," she said, her voice breaking. 2 weeks ago you learned that you have a great chance of living for decades. And—" "You didn't tell me." Faisal picked up the envelope, read it quickly, and his smile disappeared. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amina asked, tears starting to flow. "Why did you hide from me that you're going to live?" Khalid slowly stood up, like a man carrying the weight of the world. Because I needed to be sure you would stay with me, even knowing that I'm no longer a condemned man." "What?" "When I received the original diagnosis, our relationship had a natural expiration date. You would stay with me for as long as I had. You would take care of our child, and then you would be free to live your life." He ran a hand through his hair. "But if I'm going to live, if I can have decades ahead of me, I wanted to know if you would choose to stay for love, not out of pity." Amina stared at him, incredulous. So you preferred to let me think I was married to a dying man? I wanted to. You wanted to test my loyalty, just as you are doing now, listening to his accusations instead of trusting the woman who has shared your bed for months. The raw truth of her words hit Khalid like a slap. He looked at Faisal, then at Amina, and finally understood what he had been doing. You're right, he said to Faisal. I was manipulated, but not by her. He pointed at his cousin. By you. You took half-truths, twisted them, and made me doubt the only person who truly cares about me. Khalid. Get out of my house, Khalid said, his voice low but laden with authority. Get out of my company. Get out of my life. You'll regret this, Faisal threatened. I already regret it. For taking so long to do it. After Faisal left, Khalid and Amina remained alone in the office. The weight of all the lies, suspicions and fears hung between them like an almost physical barrier. Amina, Khalid began. No, she said, raising her hand. First you hide from me that you're going to live. Then you let me be accused of terrible things without fully defending me. What kind of marriage is this? A real marriage, he said desperately, with real problems, real fears, and real distrust. Khalid approached her but stopped when he saw Amina step back. Do you trust me? She asked. I trust you. Really? Because when Faisal brought these accusations, I saw in your eyes that you considered, even for a second, the possibility that they were true. Khalid couldn't deny it, because she was right. And I need someone who trusts me completely, Amina continued, especially now that we're going to have a daughter. I can't raise a child in an environment where I'm constantly suspected. What are you saying? Amina touched her belly, feeling the baby stir. I'm saying that maybe we should go back to the original agreement. You keep the company, I keep the child, and we go our separate ways. No, Khalid said immediately. I won't let you go. Then give me a reason to stay that isn't based on contract or obligation. Khalid looked into her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she saw the man she had learned to love, vulnerable, sincere, without the armor of power and distrust. Because I love you, he said simply. Not as part of an agreement, not as the mother of my child, but as the woman who brought me cardamom coffee on a Saturday morning, as someone who held my hand during chemotherapy, as the person who made me want to fight to live, not just survive. Amina felt her tears well up, but said nothing. And because you love me too, he continued. I saw it in your eyes the night we thought we might lose the baby. I saw it every time you defended me, every time you fought with me to get treatment, every time you chose to stay when you could have left. Love is not enough if there is no trust. Then teach me to trust again, Khalid said. Give me a second chance. Give us a second chance. Amina looked at the man before her, not the billionaire, not the cancer patient, not the contractual husband, but just Khalid. The man who had been strong enough to admit his mistakes, who had chosen her over the suspicions planted by others, who was asking not for right, but for love. One chance, she finally said, but no tests, no lies, no hiding things to protect me. If we're going to do this for real, it has to be with total honesty. Total honesty, he agreed, and Faisal stays away from us, forever. It's already arranged. Amina extended her hand to him. Then let's try again, not as a contract, but as a real marriage. Khalid took her hand, intertwining their fingers. As a real marriage. 3 months later, Layla al-Mansouri was born, a girl with dark eyes like her father and determination like her mother. Khalid held his daughter in his arms, with tears in his eyes, a man completely cured not only of cancer, but of the inability to trust and love without reservations. Amina, Watching her husband cradle their daughter knew she had made the right decision, not only in accepting the original proposal, but in fighting for the love that had grown between them against all odds. 6 months later, they married again, this time for love, not for convenience. The ceremony was small, only for family and close friends, but it was the most real wedding Riyadh had witnessed in a long time. At the party, Khalid gave a speech no one would ever forget. 2 years ago, I was existing, not living, building empires, but not building a life. It took a cancer diagnosis to make me realize that success without love is just sophisticated survival, and it took this extraordinary woman to teach me that sometimes the best things in life start as business agreements and turn into miracles of the heart. He looked at Amina, who held Layla in her arms. Today I am not marrying my executive assistant or the mother of my child or the woman who saved my company. I am marrying my best friend, my life partner, the woman who taught me that trusting is a choice we make every day. Amina smiled, remembering the young woman who had entered that office 2 years earlier, desperate and willing to do anything to save her mother. She could not have imagined that such an outrageous proposal would turn into the greatest blessing of her life. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, for real this time, she whispered in his ear, "Thank you for giving me the chance to choose you twice. Thank you for teaching me that the best investment I ever made was not in stocks or properties," he replied. "It was in us." And that night, under the stars of Riyadh, with their daughter sleeping in her arms and the man she loved by her side, Amina Soraya al-Mansouri knew that some stories truly have happy endings, especially those that begin with enough courage to accept the impossible and enough love to turn it into reality. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope this story has touched your heart. If you were moved, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what touched you most. Every day we bring real stories full of emotion and humanity. Your voice is part of this universe.